Welcome to Envision Radio from United Way of Greater Charlottesville, City of Promise, and News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM WINA, and brought to you by the Jefferson School Foundation with Markiana and Price, coming to you live here from downtown Charlottesville. And we're happy to have today and thrilled Shymora Cooper, the manager of the Financial Opportunity Center and Housing Hub at the Piedmont Housing Alliance, a certified housing counselor, an elected school board member, and seasoned community organizer. The list is long. So welcome today, Shymora.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is, we're off the next 2 weeks? Is
Yeah,
that right?
so this is the first one of June. It might be the last one. We'll see.
It might be. No, I think we got one at the
Vacation
end
is
of the
nice.
month, right? I think we got one at the
We have one at the very end, the last week of June.
Yeah. So that's good. You know, it's summer. Just, you know,
Summer,
everyone's got their
summertime.
kids back. That's a big joke about like, oh, school's out, like hooray, and all these parents are like, oh god,
Yeah, great.
they're coming
So do you all
back.
have
They're
summer
coming
plans?
back.
Yeah, I'm going on a historical tour next week with the Monticello Get Word Initiative and the Office of Community Partnerships and Engagement.
Sure.
I think that's what it is called nowadays. Yeah, but I'm going on like a 7-day trip through like the Civil Rights Movement, and like we're flying out and it's all inclusive, so I'm having a good time.
Okay.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, what about y'all?
I'm doing kid stuff, going to the beach and swim lessons.
You take them to camps?
and-
You want them camp parents?
No, not yet.
No.
My wife's off in the summer because she's
Oh,
a teacher.
yeah, she's
so
a
we've
teacher.
got the best possible oversight of the youth. So she gets she gets to hang out with them. I mean, they're doing stuff, but we're mostly around, right? Like, so, swim lessons and gymnastics and soccer and art
flights to
and-
Europe?
I'm not wasting that trip on a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. Y'all got to enjoy that, right? I'm not doing all that. And plus, little kids. And you've had little kids where like, you need a relative confidence that things won't implode, right? So like that trip happens in my mind, kind of like right before they're teenagers, when we're still pretty cool, but they're old enough to regulate themselves.
Yeah.
Gets to a point when they're older and they don't want to mess with us anymore, right? They're like, nah, I'm not doing that,
I don't wanna
right?
do that.
And now they're too young. We're like, one, they won't remember, and two, like, trying
But
to
does
get
that mean
them.
as when you have young kids, you can't go on no trips?
You can. I'm just saying, for me, I'm not like, let's do the big trip for the kids.
So you
because
can't
I'm
do
like,
a
you
big
don't
trip
remember
when you
that.
got kids.
You can. You can do whatever you
but,
want.
Yeah. You
But
spend
my-
a lot of money, and it's
Yeah.
not a memorable trip
For
for
the
the young
kid,
ones.
Like,
yes.
my point of view, the people like the Disney parents, like, let's go to Disney with our young kids. I'm like, why would you do that with my kids are 5 and 2. They don't even remember what they had for breakfast yesterday. Like, they're not
5
going to.
years old, you remember you went to
Listen,
Disney?
they're not going to code that. I went to Disney World with my family when I was like 10.
And you don't
And I
remember?
remember, like,
I
parts
also
of it.
went when I was like 12, and I also can't remember.
Exactly.
Maybe we shouldn't be taking the kids down. I know my mama mad I can't remember. She said, you better remember every single
That's
thing
what
you
I'm
had
saying.
down
That's
there.
the thing,
thing you
right?
ate, the little meals. I can't remember
every
nothing.
single piece of it. So yeah, I'm like, look, y'all can get a little older. We'll do the thing, but so we go to the beach and we do stuff, but the heavy logistics, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, nah, we're not doing that quite yet. Plus, traveling with little kids, you got to bring everything you own, every single
like
thing
that.
you like. Yeah, that's just a lot.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot. It's too much. Yeah.
Are you traveling this summer?
Probably will visit my sister. Haven't really made any solid plans. I usually take one trip per summer. But this summer, I have some littles that I'm caring for right now.
Ooh.
And so just like Price, it's a lot to juggle, and, with my situation, I have to get permission and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so probably just, take a flight to visit my sister for a couple of days and then come back. So nothing really exciting, but
I'm going to live for the both of you.
okay.
Okay.
You're the one taking the big trip.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, no, and then I'm going to Florida. My brother's getting married.
Okay.
Yeah, shout out to him and his fiance.
Nice.
So in Fort Myers, I don't know nothing about Florida,
Okay.
so I'm gonna go down there. And
Sure. It'd be nice.
it's gonna be a vacation for me. I don't know about
that's
what
right.
everybody else gonna be doing. Getting married, I'm going in there 7 days before the wedding
Yeah.
Okay.
and try it out.
Are you going on a week before?
Yeah, I'm going a whole week before. I'm going for the vacation.
A week?
Yeah. The wedding on the it's January 17th, but I'm going like the 10th. I'm going in there.
Oh my Lord! Florida is really nice in the winter.
That's what I heard.
It is nice in the winter.
That's why.
Yeah,
That's probably why they
yeah,
picked the
yeah.
location,
And,
destination wedding.
well, I'm sure, and it's not. I can probably tell you why they picked it, because Florida in the winter is way cheaper than Florida in the summer.
Oh yeah,
Right?
that's
I mean,
exactly
look,
why he picked it. My brother, yeah.
Let's be real about the motivation of like
The money
it's
talk.
it's just a different thing. We can give you your destination wedding. We're just gonna do it in January.
Oh yeah,
We're gonna need
they
this.
said if you do it in January,
Yeah.
we can knock $1,000
We're
off the venue.
gonna need this tax year to wrap up. We're gonna
Shoot.
start afresh in
Don't get me
2026.
started. I'll be at the church. I'll be right down the street at the home church.
Oh my Lord! I
think
you
the
what.
churches do it for free.
Listen,
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know.
Well, the courthouse does it for free. That's all you need, really.
Okay, well that's where I'll be.
You're just throwing a party for your friends at some point.
I know
which-
that's what people say.
Fine. It's fine. It's fine. And as a groom, as a former groom, I'm like the 8th most important person in my wedding. So I like pretended like I had a say. And it was like, it's her mom, it's my dad, it's my grandma, it's your grandma. I'm like, oh,
It'd
Lord.
be great if the ties was lavender. And it was like, it would be great, but it's not happening. That's all
They're like,
right.
oh, that's funny. You thought you were
Well,
participating in this.
nice.
Like,
I'm sure.
sir, you're a prop. Thank you.
You can make your
Like,
socks
yeah.
lavender. You do
already
that.
signed the paper. None of what you said even matters,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is already done. Oh, my Lord. Shymora, where's your sister?
My sister lives in Texas.
Ooh, okay.
It's bigger in Texas out here.
Yes, San Antonio.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I've heard, funnily enough, I've heard a couple people who I've known that have gone to San Antonio have really liked it.
Yes.
I've
she's-
heard it's sort of like an underratedly cool place.
Yes, and that's what she says. She's only been there for about 2 months.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, so she previously lived in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And she took the leap to Texas, and she said she loves it
Yeah,
there. It's
yeah.
really nice. The school systems are great. And it's a lot to do for the children. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've heard. It's like cool, but it's not overwhelming. Like something like Dallas, where it's I feel like for some people, like for me, I've been like in and out of Texas, but I'm always like, oh, like Dallas or Houston. They're like, it's a big state, man. There's like other stuff.
Yeah, I've never been to
There's other
Texas.
things happening.
I don't know what's in Texas besides Megan and Beyonce.
Yeah. Yes, that is
And
true.
that's the part I like about Texas.
And South by Southwest.
Yes. That's it.
Oh my Lord. Well, look, let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about and we usually take these things at least relatively chronologically early. So let's talk about growing up and just a little bit about where you're from, and then we'll move it on through.
Sure thing. So I'm from originally born in Charlottesville. Spent most of my childhood in Gordonsville. That's kind of where my family is.
Mm-hmm.
Between Gordonsville, Charlottesville, and you have some other places, but bulk of my family, my dad's side and my mother's side, is from Gordonsville. I moved to Charlottesville when I was about 14, and lived in Charlottesville ever since. Grew up in Mickey Drive, public housing, and that's kind of where my housing journey started. And lived there, graduated from Charlottesville High School, and just kind of, got involved in community work and started to meet like new people, and just got interested in like the housing space. And so kind of, when I think about like my housing journey, it, from a very young age, it started off living in like a small town in Gordonsville, where like,
They don't have no stoplights.
yeah, where you can literally walk to
Is that out
your
your way?
grandmother's house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I went to
yeah.
Gordon Barber Elementary School.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
the
that's right,
whole
that's right.
town,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
is
yeah.
no stoplight until you get to Zion's Crossroad.
Yeah.
Or to Orange.
yeah.
Somebody told me, I was like, oh my God, the town ain't big enough to have a stoplight. We got 3 circles.
Well, literally, you can walk everywhere.
Yeah.
And so all of my family, they live really close together, and pretty much everybody owned their home. And then we faced a hardship, and we had to move to Charlottesville, and then that's where my journey of living in public housing started.
What are you looking at me for? We can keep it rolling.
So when you went to Charlottesville, the transition from Gordonsville to Charlottesville, how was that? It's those two places are very different.
Yes.
And so how was that?
So for me, the transition, it was okay. You know what I'm saying? Like I come from a really large family, and some of my family also lived in Charlottesville.
Okay.
And so in the summertime, they would come to, Gordonsville because we were the type of the family where everybody gathered at grandmother's house.
Yeah.
And so, all of my cousins, we kind of grew up together, and we were more not just like cousins. We were like cousins, sisters, brothers.
Right.
And so, I had that relationship, and a lot of us are the same age. And so going to school was fine because I was going to school with familiar faces. So I had my cousins and all of that, and we were in the same grade, and so they kind of looked after you and make sure you were okay. And so like some of their friends then became your friends and stuff like that. And so, the transition was fine for me. I didn't have any problems with that because, again, I had the relationships and the families to kind of like push me along.
What did you want to, when you were 14, what did you want to do when you grew up? You moved to Charlottesville, you have this hardship, housing it becomes super important to you now. What did you want to be when you were young growing up?
So I know that for me, I've always been into helping people.
Okay.
So kind of like I don't like doing one thing. I know that, right?
You a jack of all trades.
Yeah. I always know that I get bored doing one thing. So I really didn't have like, ooh, I want to do this one thing and I'm passionate about this one thing. I'm the type of person, I'm passionate about so many things. And so I know that I wanted to be doing so many things. And so like, even on my journey, it's like I have a maintenance background.
Right.
Like, I work maintenance work. Like I have a certification in electricity. I have a certification in HVAC.
That's crazy.
What?
What made you do that?
Yeah. And so, again, through public housing and getting involved, like attending meetings, they had a program saying, hey, if you come work in the department, you could work for free. You could work, you could earn a decent amount of money, and you can learn a trade. And I'm like, I was working at UVA for like 10 years in food services. And I'm like, well, I really don't have the experience, but I'm going to throw my name in the hat to see where this goes. You're going to train me. It's on-the-job experience. And so that's what I did. I literally applied to work with Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority as an intern. And from me working with them, it became a full-time job, and I started to work in the maintenance department. And I went to K-Tech, and I took all of my classes for my journeymans, and I would use those skills with on-the-job training. And so I learned how to do all of those things while I worked for Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing.
Did you enjoy electric work?
I enjoy it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it gives me the skills to now fix my own home. And
I'm about to say, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's an interesting story, and as your work and my work overlap a lot, and as it pertains to public housing. But I'm fascinated in the question of, is the path you took replicable, or is it a you thing, right? And so trying to think about, like, as you reflect on the things that you did, the opportunities that you capitalized on, right? Do we look at that and say, well, she's a bug, not a feature, right? Mm-hmm. Or is there something in there that's replicable that's saying, well, look, because I only ask it in the context of, I don't find that there's as many people as I think there should be that are doing that at any given time. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, that signals to me that perhaps there's sort of a fundamental issue with the path that you as a person were able to overcome because of the various things that make you great at what you do. Or is it the kind of thing that, you see what I'm saying? Because I think about that, like my mother, I talk about all the time. I'm like, Mom, you are the bug, not the feature. Like, stop doing that, right? Like, that's a you thing. Yeah. And I wonder if you thought about that, of like, some of these things that I've been able to put in place have really been sort of intrinsic, or there is like a system that other folks can fit into. We just haven't quite hit the right combination of things yet.
I think that it is a system. I think that could work, and it has worked, because it was people before me that came through and done the same thing, right? And so I think that for some of the programs, you have to want to do it, right?
Yeah, sure.
You have to want to show up. Like I would have never thought that I would be doing maintenance work, and be good at it, like, I think that it was like a hard space to be in, because I was the only female.
Okay.
And so, like, it was spaces where, we would go into, and they would be like, oh, I got it. And I'm like, no, I'm capable. I can change a toilet.
Sure,
I need you to do this for me.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And so, it was situations and times like that. But I do think that I also had a really good mentor that allowed me to work alongside him, and was able to show me, like, okay, you change this faucet, I'm going to watch you, and then I'll tell you what you did wrong, and then the next time you can fix it.
Yeah.
And then, and that's how I was able to learn throughout the process. I do think that, it's some really good programs that come through. I just think that, folks have to, sometimes shift the mindset and say, this is temporarily, and once I do this thing, it will position me better to do the next thing.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think some of the programs that they do have are really good programs because, like the internship program, it allowed me not to pay rent for the whole time that I was in the program. So it allowed me to save money for home ownership. And then through that, I was then able to purchase my home for me and my family. And so I was able to transition from public housing into home ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big leap.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
But I think the thing she mentioned about having to shift, it's like, maybe I didn't want to be a journeyman, but that, you like, it's a long game. You're like, it's a journeyman, so I can do this part to save the money. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I don't want to be, the first part is I don't want to be no journeyman. Now I got to get into a mindset about that. And I'm not thinking how the journeyman can lead the president. It's hard, I think, for people to see past the next step in front of them to imagine the whole staircase.
Well, and that's also, I would argue, heavily environmental, right? You don't have the bandwidth, either resource-wise or you're not allowed to.
No. Yeah.
Right? And you know what I'm saying? And so I think that it's a how do you reflect on that leap ever or often, or just like, I mean, like what did that feel like? Like do you have a memory of that? Of like, oh, this is my house. Like, I can punch a hole in the wall. I can do whatever I want. I'm gonna paint something. Right?
Yeah. So, definitely, what I'm saying? Like, I always knew. And so, like, and to for me, my passion was different than many others, right? And so, again, when I started to like take this journey, like my mom passed away, and so the reason that home ownership was so important to me is because once my mom passed away, right? My mom lived in public housing. My mom was disabled, and so once she passed away, they said my mom had been living there for probably over 15 years. Mm-hmm. And so they said, oh, and it's just me and my sister. You have 30 days to get her things out, right? Sure. And so it left me and my sister, we were really young. It left us no time to grieve, right? It was like funeral, now packing up mom's house. Mm-hmm. It's 15 years of stuff that you have to figure out what you do with it, what you get, where do you put it? Do you give it away? Do you donate it? And so it was real heavy for us. And so for me, my journey was different because I said I never want my kids to experience that. I never wanted my kids to experience that level of pain. And so how do I become a homeowner so that I have something that's mine? And so that if or when I do transition, this is not something that my kids have to carry. If
you are just, we're going to put our piece in here. If you're just hopping in, this is Envision Radio from the United Way of Greater Charlottesville and City of Promise, News Radio 98.9 AM 1070 WINA. Price and Markey here with Shymora Cooper in the studio downtown. And again, big thanks to our friend and sponsor, the Jefferson School Foundation, the proud owner of the Jefferson School City Center. Go.
And so now with your work with the Financial Opportunity Center, how does that, tie into your housing journey and how you help people in this space moving forward?
Sure. And so, I'm passionate about many things, as you know. But, the Financial Opportunity Center and Housing Hubs allows me to be able to create programs for families for upward mobility, right? And so we have so many different programs, right? So it's not only about home ownership because not everybody wants to own a home, right? So we have programs to help people get into rental housing. We help people like the Financial Empowerment Program where we're working with people in credit, emergency savings. We're helping people, from getting evicted. And so having strategies of connecting to resources. We have housing counseling programs where we are helping people get into home ownership. So I think we have for me, it's just like a holistic approach of services to keep people housed and helping people work towards upward mobility so that they have some stability. And so, this is one of the areas that I'm passionate about of helping people see that, home ownership is possible. Working towards fixing your credit is possible. Savings is possible if you are committed to showing up and, working with a coach or a counselor. Then, you will see some success. And it may not happen with a month. And I think, like, for some people, it's like, I want instant gratification.
Yeah, yes.
Like, I want to see it now, right? And so I always tell people, like, if you trust the process and you stick with it, then you will see the results on the end. But sometimes that result can take 6 to 12 months. But you have to be committed to showing up and following your action plan. And I will guarantee that you would see results.
So being in this space, what is the biggest obstacle, not just for people, but in the affordable housing community, and as the years roll by and housing becomes less affordable? Like, what are some...
we on them got there.
What are some...
We are here.
What are the obstacles that you've seen come up in that time, the time that you've been working in the housing space, but also what are some of the wins you've seen over the years in this space?
Okay, so do you all know what the median sales price for a home in Charlottesville?
I could take a guess. I was like, for something.
Okay. Price?
I said $450.
It's about $529,000.
Is it really?
Is it really?
Yes. The median sales price for a home in Charlottesville.
Wow.
And
450 was my high number. Like, I was like, she ain't gonna say no number higher than that.
Yeah.
And so when you think about purchasing a home, right?
Yeah.
That means you have to make over 6 figures to be able to purchase a home in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
And
the get-in price has increased like 2,000% in the last 5 years.
And then we're talking about interest rates and debt-to-income ratio. So that knocks a lot of families out of the box. Yeah. Right?
I mean,
That's everybody. I couldn't make it. That's
listen,
everybody. I don't got no home.
The
so
house that
everybody.
I built, the house that my wife and I built, I couldn't afford if I tried to buy it
today.
right now.
Right.
And not it would be a stretch. Like,
you cannot.
It ain't happening. Yeah. Like, it's not happening because for that reason too. I mean, it's the dollars and cents, but also the difference in the interest rate and my mortgage would almost triple. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just based on the interest rate alone.
Yeah. Well, I tried to get a home. You remember? I was like,
I
got to that debt to income. I said, well, I told the realtor, I'm going to have to call you back. She was showing me some nice houses. I was like, well, girl, first of all, I'm by myself. I'm about to go find me somebody to marry real quick if I can get this house. I said, give me a little time. I'll give me a little somebody to pay the rent, half the mortgage with me. That's what I'm going to have to do.
And I think that's the struggle, right? Because a lot of families are not making the money to be able to live in Charlottesville, Albemarle. And even now, like, you used to could go to Fluvanna or Louisa or Green or Ruckersville. But now when you're looking at those prices are rising too, like $350.
I'm in Ruckersville and it's crazy.
So the spread has happened. Because we used to talk about this like 10 years ago, where we were like, it's going to get there. Think like, if you're the guy, I will never forget a neighbor of my wife who in Forest Lakes North, when their kids are sort of our age and they're like mid to late 30s, and they bought their house in Forest Lakes in 1990 for like a handful of raspberries, and they sold it in like 2019 for some incredible sum of money, like no inspection, sight unseen, sold it, and then they were like, we're gonna move to basically like just across the Albemarle County line, because we don't have kids anymore, so we're not worried about school. We're going to basically buy a house that we're going to sell again in like 3 years because everyone's going to come out here. Yeah. Lo and behold, right?
Shifting.
All of a sudden,
they're really building in Ruckersville.
Here we go. Like, this is exactly because all of a sudden things got too expensive here and it just starts to sprawl. Yeah.
Ruckersville is super expensive too. That's why I was looking. I was like, I'm out of town. I'm not even in town. Yeah. It's supposed to be cheap out here. But no, they throwing up like 4 like townhome developments in the last year.
Is that right?
Yes, there's one on. They've made a huge one on 29 as you get to the Sheets. Right down 29 on the right, and then they made a huge one back in Pretty Creek.
Okay. Oh, really?
A huge one back. Like, I grew up, there was literally wood. It was the forest.
Oh yeah,
and now it's leveled and they're building townhomes. Yeah.
Is that right? Well, they're doing all that on the John Warner Parkway too, up there on the whatever that is.
I mean, they said we ain't gonna sell it for cheap, but we ain't gonna sell it for over $500,000.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's still super expensive, but it's like you'd rather stay out here and commute than go to town.
How do you rectify that in your work with housing? Obviously, it is often talked about as sort of a wealth generation engine and things of that nature. How do you rectify that with sort of family dynamics, right? So if let's say we have the money or close to the money, we can figure out the money thing. Then you're talking about, like you said, you're talking about proximity, you're talking about schools, you're talking about quality of life, you're talking about, right? Like it is, I guess that as you talk to people, like, is there kind of an advisory piece of like, is it better to rent something smaller to send your kid to Broadus Wood versus buying a house and, somewhere 45 minutes away, right? Because I think that was the hard part for us. Again, like in this house, it was like we have to triangulate much more things. When I'm 24, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I want to live. I want to like walk downtown. I don't really care. Whatever. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I got to be, close to kids stuff, or I want to be in this school district, or we have the I mean, does that has to make it more complicated, right?
Yeah, and so like when I'm counseling or coaching a client that's interested in home ownership, those are the things that I talk about with them first. And so, purchasing a home, reviewing folks' credit, and, going over their bank statements and stuff with them can be heavy, right?
Of
and
course.
sometimes,
Sure.
some people feel embarrassed.
I was like, I'm doing well, and I'd be embarrassed. I would feel embarrassed. Why'd you buy that trinket? I don't know. Girl. I was at a bad day at work, girl. I don't know.
And so one of the things that I like to start off with is having them manifest over what is it that they want, right? And so, like, tell me, what type of house do you want? What does it have to look like? What are your non-negotiables, right? And then we talk about what can you afford, right? And so once we talk about those, and then we go into affordability piece, we kind of like, okay, so, a lot of people say, well, I want to go into gardening, but I still want to live in Charlottesville. Well, we know that to buy a house in Charlottesville with land, you're going to pay about $700,000-800,000 dollars to live in that house, right?
Yeah.
So what about if we can get you a house that may be a townhome, but you next to a community garden where you now have a plot that you can go to, right? And so started to like brainstorm and again shift in the mind of like, okay, what's realistic and what is, something that you are willing to give up. And so then the conversation kind of shift of like, oh, okay, well, this makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
Because I'll be like, yeah, I want that $700,000 house.
Yeah, sure.
But but I know that I cannot afford that, right? And
Yeah.
so helping them see of like what they can afford,
Sure.
what's out there. Like we'll look and I'll show them like what's out there. And then giving them options, right? And giving them options. Okay, do you have a family or a friend that you want? Like, if this is what you want, this is like not negotiable. Then do you have someone can go on the loan with you and you all can live together so that you can afford it?
Sure.
And so helping them like kind of brainstorm around some of that has kind of been helpful for us to be able to kind of shift some of those conversations to say, oh, okay, well, maybe I am not being realistic at this moment. And I tell them, okay, so what about a starter house? Like this is something that you live in for a period of time, because what we're facing now, a lot of folks come to us with landlords selling properties, and so they may be renting, right? And then the landlord come and say, hey, you have 30 days to get out. And we're seeing a lot of that recently, right? And so we just had a family that we housed in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
Can you do that? As a landlord can do that?
Yeah. Hey, I'm selling the property. All the landlord has to do is give you 30 days.
30-day notice.
And so they gave them a 30-day notice, and they were having trouble finding a place. And so one of my housing navigators, with my housing navigator, they are working with landlords, and they're like researching what's available. What are the qualifications for people to get into. And so with the work that she's done and the relationship she's built, she was able to reach out to one of her landlords to say, hey, I have this family. They have to move in such and such time. Are you able to house them? And so we were able to get them housed in less than 2 weeks. But, for some people, we can't do that.
Right.
It depends on what their credit looks like. It depends on what they can afford. And so that's, again, what some of our families are facing is when the landlord says, hey, I'm selling this property, then you have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. And it's challenging to find somewhere in Charlottesville.
How does legislative context affect the work that you guys are doing? I mean, all the things with regards to what is even affordable housing, and what does that mean? And what does that mean monetarily? And does that match with the amount of money that people actually make? And then I think there's this other layer of the old Warren Buffett quote, which is something to the effect of like, when people are greedy, be worried, and when people are worried, be greedy. So like in an environment like right now, if you're an institutional investor with liquid assets, you say, yeah, I'll buy that house that I know is too expensive, because when interest rates comes down, I'll just refinance out of it and I'm good. Right? Like, there's all those other levers that people like, that starter house that you would say, hey, look, it's $215,000 and we can put you in it because it's a townhouse in Georgetown Green. I have to imagine there's 5 other people circling that.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's not people like the people who we're working with. It's just some knucklehead who's like, cool, like, I'll grab a rental property at 7%. I can float that for 3 years at a loss. And then when it hits 5, I'll refinance out and all of a sudden I'm balanced, right? Like how, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of legislative protection against that, right? So like, do you run into that? Like, how does that work?
Oh yeah. Listen, houses will be on the market for 2 days and it's gone.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
how are you how are you searching that fast? It's crazy to me.
I would say, like, even I get calls now of people trying to buy my house. You know,
is that right?
Yeah. I'm like, no.
Hi, this is Dave. Are you trying to not have a house?
It's predatory. Why is you calling me at my house? I've been in for 10 years talking about some third the price, girl, please.
And so that's a real thing. And so it's like, you have to be ready. And that's why I tell people, if you're ready, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So when it comes available, you can say, hey, to your realtor, like, I'm interested in this house. I want to look at this house. And they can put in the offer. But, with Charlottesville and Albemarle, we do have a lot of investors with a lot of money, and that's buying up a lot of the properties. So it does make it that much difficult to put people in affordable housing. I would say that some ways that we have been able to kind of combat a little bit of it is through the Community Land Trust, Piedmont Housing Yes. While that shouldn't be the only option, because, it comes, the land trust, you don't own the land, that's a big thing for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, sure.
I don't own the land, right? But it's and I have to look at it like, wow, I don't think this should be the only option. And if you purchase, you should be able to own the land. But I was like, look at it as a starter house, right? And how do you, like, if you're renting, you're not building equity. And so even if, if I'm a single mother, but I want to own a home for me and my family, how do I, be able to get into a home, start to build some level of equity, put myself in a better situation, and then sell this home within 5 years or 10 years. It depends on how long that takes you or what that looks like for you. And then buy the home that I want or I dream for. And so, again, it's like maybe thinking outside of the box of like what home ownership looks for me or could look like for me. And then, attacking it in that way of like, okay, I'm going to buy this land trust home for $260,000. I'm going to live in it for 5 years. I'm going to build $40,000 to $50,000 worth of equity. And then I'm going to take that $40,000 to $50,000 and buy me this $350,000, $400,000 home that I want.
So talk a little bit about, you're in this housing space. What motivates you to get into being on the school board and how those two spaces connect?
I think what motivated me is because, having children in the school system, and, I was like I was one of the PTO moms that was involved in like
not a PTO,
the PTO, with my younger kids from an early age, and just kind of being involved and kind of seeing, how like the school system work and how like, and then also working in the housing space and seeing a lot of our kids, just struggling to read, struggling to write, and then, just having a hard time, and, just watching moms, and some dads or families having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And so you don't have that time to kind of like be there and sit at that kitchen table with your family and have dinner. And, I was one of them, right? I was working, I was involved in community stuff. And, I always laugh with my daughter, like I would put my daughter on my hip and we would go walk to like community meetings because I wanted to know like what was happening in the community. And, I always was one to use my voice. And so, from seeing that and seeing like how some of the systems was set up, right? It's like some folks I feel like may not understand what it's like to be a single mom, to have kids, to have to work. And some of the jobs that you're working are heavy jobs, right? If you say that your kid is sick, they don't care. They want you to come to work. Like, okay, your kid's sick. What you want me to do about it? I need you to be here by 8 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? And so, just trying to balance all of that. And so my passion with like making sure that our kids are taken care of, that our kids are well, emotionally, physically, and healthy, and then also that families have safe, decent, affordable houses, because I think that, in order for our children to thrive, they need a safe place to live. They need a decent place to live. And so they need healthy communities. And so, just bridging the housing sector as the housing sectors continue to redevelop and to grow, right? The schools need to be talking to the housing advocacy folks and making sure that we are supporting families, right? In the process of people being moved around and shuffled, are we talking to each other? Are we having conversations? Are we making sure that we have, like, one of my goals is to see after-school programs come into the community, right? And that we are paying teachers to come into our communities after school and do after-school, tutoring. And so that we're working with our kids, not just throughout the school year, but maybe over in the summer, right?
Right.
Because learning doesn't stop. And so just so that we're more intentional about how we work together and how we care for our students overall.
Isn't there something about if during the summer kids lose a
Summer
large
slide.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I was gonna say I forget what it was. I was like, they lose like half the information that you taught them that year if you don't keep them learning and doing stuff. So that's crazy. Price, that's on you. Like that's your area.
That is my area. I mean, all that. Look, we're not going to get too far into this because this ain't about me. But you spend 4 times as much time out of school as you do in anyway. So when you talk about the environmental factors that affect your scholastic achievement, it's heavily environmental, and that comes down from where you live and how you live and what you eat and how you get around. There's all of those things, right? And so the summer's a huge issue, and it's not one that I think that we as a municipality have really taken seriously enough. And we dug into it a little bit this year, and it's worse than I thought. Right? I mean, it's just it's a combination of lack of accessibility because of things that for us seem simple. Like, okay, cool, you can come to this camp at CCC Camp. And you got people like,
Well, how am I going to get there?
right? Like, hold on, time out, right? And so what people do, and look, the hard part about a lot of this is it's all well-meaning, but I think your point's well taken. Is like, as someone with lived experience, your perspective's different, right? Because it's very easy to be like, oh, we'll provide scholarships to kids from the neighborhood. And we go, that's lovely. That's like one of 4 things that make this possible. So like, I love that, and that's great, but you can't hold that up as a like, well, we tried our best, because truthfully, there's more to it than that, right? And so we have this kind of piecemeal thing where we haven't quite, in my estimation, been quite firm enough on like, okay, that's great, but stop celebrating that like you did something, because 1, that doesn't really help, and 2, there's 55 kids who are trying to organize and put places and do all this kind of stuff. And then there's obviously the money piece where it's like, okay, if you can get here, it's going to cost you $200 a week. And I'm like, y'all just haven't done the math on that, right? Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And so with the after school thing and the summer thing are things that we're looking at increasingly, because what you realize, and what I've certainly experienced having kids of my own, of that, like, the orchestration of a summer for a little kid requires both money and time. And for a lot of the folks who certainly we overlap with, at best you got one, you usually got neither. And so to not have either of those things, and for us as practitioners to just be like, see you in August. Yeah. And then we get real confused. We're like, why are these kids testing so low? And then and we just do this over and over and over again. And we're like, why can't all these teenagers read? And we're like, we haven't done anything for a decade. And so, I mean, it is a fundamentally like kind of goofy, because like I think that more and more we're starting to do better about being like, okay, we know these things connect. Now let's connect them in a way that makes a little more sense and provides the level of support that we know kids need, both internally and externally, across all these different dimensions. So, I mean, the environment part of it's huge. How much do you guys do sort of advocacy policy-wise? Is that a place where you guys are going, that you want to go, that you don't want to go? Again, with regards to, like, how that story affects your work, is that a place that you guys dabble, or what's the comfort level there?
As far as
well, so just sort of when we think about affordable housing in Charlottesville and the intricacies of how the policies work and how the developers work, and do you guys get involved in that, or are you more sort of practitioner focused, I guess I would say, right? Like, I know you guys obviously do a lot of work with people. Like, is it going
to the courthouse and doing some stuff?
Not so much that. I know you do a lot of work with the people, but...
so, like, as far as, like, the policies to help with, like...
Yeah, right. So, like, hey, we're going to work with this person in the environment that currently exists, but is there also a wild hair to be like, well, it would be kind of easier if, like,
we talk to the legislative body
better. Yeah.
So I would say in the housing space, yes.
Okay.
In the housing space, we definitely are able to kind of look at some of our policies. With some of our down payment loan assistance grants, it is what it is. It's like DCHD, you have to follow the guidelines.
Right.
But we can be a little bit more flexible with in-house funding, right?
Okay.
And so, we completed, and it was a team of us that completed a project with the homes that were sold on top of Prospect Avenue. And so, even with those homes, we were able to help folks be able to purchase those homes, because we wanted folks in that community, in the Prospect community, to be able to purchase those homes. The goal was to take them from renter to homeowner.
Okay.
And so in that process, some of our families had their debt to income ratios. We had to get the debt to income ratios aligned.
Okay.
And so we were able to use some funding in that process to be able to help them pay off current debt to get them to where they needed to be. And so in that instance, we were able to be flexible with some of our funding sources to kind of help people get across the finish line.
Yeah.
And so, it was work that they had to do on their own as well. But a lot of those families, we worked with them from probably 6 to 12 months. And then, we were able to use $10,000 for them to be able to pay off their debt or go towards closing or buy their interest rate.
Wow.
And so there was some flexibility in that, right?
Yeah.
And so, Tasia did a really good job with creating the policy for that and making sure that the families that were interested in those homes be able to actually purchase those homes. And so it was a lot of work. We canvassed the neighborhood. We talked to a lot of people.
Yeah.
We had open house, and we, I was talking to people and say, hey, are you interested in home ownership? Do you want to buy a house?
Yeah, right.
He was out there.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, do you want to buy a house? And they was like, I can't buy a house. I was like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Show up at this meeting this day, and I guarantee you will buy a house.
Huh.
And they were like, okay, I'm going to see what it's about.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, show up. And they showed up,
Yeah, sure.
And the end result was they were able to purchase a house. And so, in some instances, I would say yes, we're able to, change some things or look at some policies to see how we can be, more equitable to making sure that our low income and to moderate income families be able to purchase. But then some grants that we have to kind of follow those guidelines.
Sure.
And then I would say, like, as far as like the space with school board, it's policy driven. So we are able to, when it's time to look at policies, to see how we can, maybe change some policies to make, kind of combat some of the issues that we have been seeing. And so I would say, can't say a lot because I also didn't let my school board folks know I was coming here today. But that's one of the things that I would say that I am interested in is looking at the retention policy. I'm looking at the retention policy and seeing how, we could, just make that more stronger. Absenteeism is a huge issue, and just kind of seeing how we can better support families to get their kids to school.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a lot of our retention. Some of our retention too is kids being able to get to school.
Sure.
And what are the barriers, and how are we talking to these families, and how are we setting these families up to making sure that our kids are getting to school.
Yeah. Yeah. There's it's all that and then some. And I think to your point, like, that all has a massive impact on the, scholastic opportunities for the kid, and doesn't have anything to do with 4 walls and smart boards and recorders, right? Like, there's all that other stuff that either prepares or puts in the way what you're going to get when you walk through the door.
Right. Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think that's, that is a conversation that certainly you have heard a lot of me on and will continue to with the, because that's where we're at. And that's a lot of what we're agitating for and thinking about. If you are just jumping in, this is Envision Radio from United Way of Greater Charlottesville and City of Promise, News Radio 98.9, AM 1070 WINA. Price, Markey, Shymora Cooper here in the studio. And a big thanks again to the Jefferson School Foundation. So let's shift a little bit to, so you've already always been, very active in a community member doing 1,000 things. Why the school board?
Why school board? I had a couple of friends, one in particular, Holly Hatcher.
Mm-hmm.
Holly and I have been friends for over probably 40 years now.
Wow.
Well, not
What?
40 years.
Whoa.
Not 40 years, I'm sorry.
I was like, really?
Wow.
It's been about, so Holly and I started being friends about when my daughter was 1 and she's about to be 24 now.
Okay.
So,
Wow. Wow.
we've been friends for over 20 years. And so, I learned a lot from Holly
Sure.
Hatcher. And when I first started out too, I started off in FAR, I was a FAR intern,
Okay.
too. And so Holly was my, teacher. And
Okay.
so, yeah. And so, I started out really young. And so I would say for, just kind of working with Holly. And then, as I got older, when I was frustrated or something like that with something that was happening in school, I would call Holly and I would say, hey, Holly, this is what I'm dealing with. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And so, when 2 years ago, no, it was 4 years ago, she was like, you should run for school board. I think you would be really good. You have really good perspectives. And I was like, Holly, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, sure.
And she kept, she kept being on me I think that you would really be good for this. And so, just attending some school board meetings, kind of talking to folks that were already on the school board, and just kind of deciding, okay, maybe now it's time. And so, and then I ran, and I think it was me and Amanda, and Nicole running at the same time, and it was already 3 seats that was open. So it wasn't a heavy lift
Sure.
At that time. And so, kind of done my little campaigning and, put the little signs and stuff out and was elected and, and I'm loving it. I'm learning a lot, having some really good conversations. I think that, Dr. DeGurley do a really good job. But, it's always areas for improvement. And I think that's where we come in as a school board, and kind of, bring our perspectives of what we hope to see, and kind of making sure that things are happening the way that they say they're happening. So I think that with Holly giving me that push and then me starting to watch and then, attending more school board meetings and stuff like that is where I was like, all right, I'm gonna go for it and see what it's about.
Is it what you thought it would be? And if not, how is it different? Right? I think that sort of the popular perception of municipal government for a lot of us, or at least people my age, is Parks and Rec episodes, right?
Yes.
Just right? It's just one overzealous city council member,
Yes,
one Ron
we're gonna get the
Swanson,
park,
and then nothing kind of happening, and what I mean? That's obviously an incredibly glib take, but have you found it to be in either ways, big or small, more or less useful, more or less efficient, more, are there things that you were like, oh, I didn't really know that that's how that worked, or I'm really now I'm less surprised about why stuff doesn't work because I've seen, right? What has kind of been, some interesting insights that you've got from being, inside of it?
Very interesting for me. At the beginning, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And
those meetings are long too.
I come from a world of organizing and advocacy, right?
Stuff happens.
Yes. So it was really different because it's more policy driven, right? And so, I was like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and change the world.
That's what everybody says. Yes.
And then I'm like, hold up, that's not my role.
Let me review the 70-page budget prescription first.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And then I got in and I was like, oh, this is what we do. But I would say it has been a really a really good time for me to be able to kind of learn some of the
Yeah.
policies and kind of like read. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is how this works.
Sure.
Right.
And stuff like that. But I would say for the first year, it was really tough because, things that I wanted to talk about or,
Yeah, sure.
push the agenda, it was like, that's not your job. Like, your job is to review policies and stuff like
Okay,
that.
sure.
And so, that was definitely a different transition. I would say for school board, I also didn't think that it required that much time. But
Is it a lot of hours?
yes, it's a lot of hours. And I would say, like, since I've been on, I feel like it's almost a full-time job,
Yeah.
because it's a lot of like reading. It's a lot of
Lord.
responding to emails. It's a lot of meetings that you have to show up at. If you want to do it effectively, being present in communities, like talking to people, it's just more than attending a school board meeting and then, going into closed session and then having the school board meeting, right? For me, I'm talking to people. I'm in the community. And everybody has a story, right? And so, like, and then for me, again, it's like going into community and then I hear all of these stories of like, hey, I have a problem with, and I think they think that I can fix it,
Yeah.
And
When you will come ahead and talk, they're like, okay, well,
yeah.
we know you from the street, so when I tell you something, it better be fixed by tomorrow.
Yeah.
If I told you the pencils is bad, well, Shymora gonna get in there and fix the pencils. That's because I told her about it.
Yeah, and so that's that advocacy organizing space, right?
Sure.
It's like fixing things. And so, it's like having to tell people, okay, I understand, I'll pass it along to the right people, or, giving them the tools to do it themselves. Okay, hey, I understand that this is frustrated. Here's how you talk to the teacher, or here's how you connect with the with the superintendent. And so being able to like shift families to the right people to have those conversations, because again, as a school board member, that's not my role.
Right.
My role is to look at the policies and see how we can, create policies to make sure that the policies are, equitable and all of that good stuff. So I think that was the hardest part for me with like for the first year of school board is understanding the role of the school board and how like the school board operates. So
What advice would you give to young people who want to get involved, want to be in the housing space, want to be in, the nonprofit space? What advice would you give them for this work?
Don't do it.
What advice?
You don't got. You say.
So I think that I would say the advice that I give my children is to use your voice, right? Use your voice, and then remember that all dreams are possible, right? And so just pouring into what you love to do, taking the opportunity to talk to the right people, to, connect with resources. I started my daughter off young, attending like meetings. Like my daughter stayed on my hip. And so now she's able to advocate for herself, right? She understands the importance of connecting to resources and following through, right? And so that is how she's able to move, because she's able to like, and of course, they always come back and say, hey, Mom, did I do the right thing? Or did I say the right thing? And so I always encourage people to like use your voice because your voice is powerful, and so, also like, connecting to, it's a lot of resources. Charlottesville has a lot of resources. And I think that if you are passionate about a thing, it's connecting, like United Way has the Prosper program where you can get funding to go to school, right? Or to further your professional development, right? Why aren't more people tapping into that, right? So, like, if you work in a job that you don't want to work, like, go get a certification. You can tap into United Way if you qualify and get that certification, and then use that certification to get another job to pay you more. The Financial Opportunity Center, like, we have resources to help with credit. We have resources to help with employment. We have resources to help with resumes. Taking advantage of the services to help you get to where you need to be is one of the things that I would say. It's like taking advantage of your resources. And I know sometimes it can be hard. Like, I don't want to meet with these people. I don't want to talk to these people. But if you really want something, then, like, if you're committed to it, it'll get you to where you want to be.
That's true.
How has do you think about often just sort of the perspectives of you and the work that you do with a lot of people on the community front, but also employee colleague wise, right? Like, and I'm thinking both, at Piedmont Housing and the Financial Opportunity Center, but also on the school board. How do you sort of measure and match, and keep an eye on sort of how your lived experience affects your work, right? Like you're sitting on the school board with people who don't have the same perspective as you or the same experience as you or the same, they're not in the same season of life as you, right? And I think a lot of how in my sort of short time, sort of in this world, the way that we view education is largely dictated by sort of where we are in that journey of dealing with kids, but also obviously our backgrounds, right? How have you found that in your work, right? And have you, had opportunities to lean on the like, yo, listen, I know you read the book, but I've done it, right? Right? Versus, and I think we don't do a good job of mixing like pedagogical rigor with like actual real functional experience. We either go in one direction or the other, right? Have you found that to be difficult? Have you found that to be a relatively easy mix? And again, I think mostly in the school board thing, right? You have like, well, I have a PhD in education. I'm like, cool, man. Like, I'm the mother of little kids, right? And so how do those things fit together?
I think that, again, sometimes it's challenging for me. But I do think that, again, I'm one to use my voice. So I make myself heard. And I do think that like the board currently, we do listen to each other. And I think that we do work well with each other, and so that has been helpful in that space. And I think that, when you are involved in the community and a lot of people know you and stuff like that, and they see the work that you do, they respect what you have to say. And so that's kind of been nice to be able to like, I understand that's your perspective, but here's my perspective. And where can we, take your perspective and my perspective and, come to a common goal that could help all of us, right? And so I think that for me, that's been helpful. And, just being able to listen to what other people have to say, and then using my voice to say what I have to say, and then kind of talking through those things and having healthy conversations has really been helpful. And then sharing my lived experience to say, hey, this may have worked for you and your family, but this doesn't work for my family. And here's why. Here's why it doesn't work, right? As a single mother, I wasn't able to do X, Y, and Z, right? You can send your kids to the YMCA, but I can't because I don't have transportation to pick them up, right? And so while the YMCA sounds good for you, it's not good for me because I can't get there to get my kids. And I don't want to catch the bus because it takes me an hour for the next bus to come. And it's just really frustrating because I want to get home. I'm tired and all of those things. And so having those real, raw conversations in a safe space and then people being like, well, I never thought about that. Thanks for sharing.
Do you get that a lot?
Yeah.
Does that make you happy, heartened, or annoyed?
Sometimes it depends on what the situation is, all of that, and sometimes sometimes I can leave a meeting and I'm tense, or, I can feel like the frustration in my face or, and the tightness in my body, you know what I'm saying? But what I've learned through working with my coach is being able to name those things, being able to recognize those things, and navigate, right? And navigate all of those things to be able to take care of myself in those moments. I think self-care is huge. And we, in this work, I'm quite sure and I'm quite sure working in these spaces, these nonprofit spaces, we have to take care of ourselves. And I would say that I didn't used to do a good job of that. I used to work around the clock. I
80-hour weeks.
Computer in my face. But now I've set those work boundaries and I've set those, boundaries across the board to say, no, at 5 o'clock, I'm closing up, you can no longer call me if it ain't on fire. No, I'm not responding to that email until the next day. But prior to, I felt like I always needed to be in go mode. Like because I felt like I needed to prove myself. But I no longer feel that. And I love that for me.
Snaps. If people want to get in touch with FOC, or any of the work, get resources, how can they find you guys and connect?
Sure. So you can go to Piedmont Housing Alliance website. You could also email housing counseling at piedmonthousing.org. Or you can email me, and I'm S. Cooper at piedmonthousingalliance.org. And so if you send us an email, if you complete an intake online, one of our staff members, it depending on what services that you need, would get back to you within at least 4 to 5 business days.
Do you have an income requirement?
So it depends on what services that you are interested in. And we use the area median income for like down payment loan assistance, and you can find that on the Piedmont Housing Alliance website.
Right on. Big thanks to Shymora for coming and hanging out with us. If you have ideas for the show or want to contact us, check us out on social media on all platforms at United Way, at City of Promise, or drop a note in the inbox and vision at unitedwaycville.org. And if you like what you hear, share this with your friends. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And, of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, are we coming up on the end of fiscal years? Is your fiscal year
June 30?
Is yours June 30 too?
Yes.
We are coming up to the end of a fiscal year for all of us. So, again, if you're feeling particularly generous, time, talent, and treasure to any of our great local nonprofits, Piedmont Housing Alliance, Financial Opportunity Center, United Way of Greater Charlottesville, and City of Promise. Again, big thanks to our sponsor, the Jefferson School Foundation, the proud owner of the Jefferson School City Center, where education, innovation, and community engagement come together to build a brighter future dedicated to preserving and sustaining the historic Jefferson School. We are off for the next 2 weeks. I guess we'll just run some old stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll run through some old stuff. You enjoy your trip. You enjoy the weather. For Shymora and Marky, this is Price. We will see y'all in 3 weeks.
Yes.
Peace.
Peace.
Bye.